So please, can I just add my welcome to this open invitation, basically, of knowledge sharing. So the purpose when we were putting this together was to think about how we give you more information about the national rollout for 2021 and the extended early rollout for this September. So it might be that you're already involved with another organisation in your area. It might be that you're looking to make some connections today. All that this is intended to be is a transparent offer of information so colleagues across the region are aware of what's going to be happening for them in the future. So if we follow up with you and it's more appropriate for you to have a connection to a different partnership, we'll make sure that we direct you to the right colleague for your area. Okay, so why the ECF, why ambition, and why are we bothering you 2 weeks before the end of an incredibly busy term? Well, the key information is on the slide in front of you. Basically, the ECF has given us this amazing opportunity to create a valuable partnership at a really crucial time for education. And there's a fantastic opportunity here for meaningful collaboration across the city and the wider region. And we're really excited to be working on something together that we think is incredibly essential, especially in our current climate. The Ambition partnership was just an absolute no-brainer for us. Their excellent reputation, their professionalism, the accessibility and the quality of the resources that they're producing, and their real passion for colleague development meant that it was just a real win-win. They've got a real proven record of competence in this field, and they've been at the forefront of the creation and delivery of the ECF. And they're acting as a very strong driving force for this really exciting time for early career teachers. So we're involved because being so secures quality training and quality support for our NQTs and allows us to help them develop as really high quality classroom practitioners. The added benefit of being able to do this a year ahead of national rollout means that we're actually part of this transition to the ECF rather than being reactive to it. So we can contribute resources, we can look at delivery, we can give feedback, and we're going to be an active part of delivering the output that will work best for our schools and for our colleagues. We do need to mention COVID. It's the elephant in the room. It has presented opportunities and challenges to teaching, and there are benefits for the ECF, for students, for NQTs, for mentors and schools that we just can't really ignore. Being part of the early rollout as well means that we're ahead of the game, and we get to be part of what's a truly transformational stage in education. If you weren't convinced by any of that, it's free, and it's really good when things are free, and the legwork's all been done for you as well. But all I wanted to do really was kind of give you a broad overview there. You've come to listen to the experts, so I'm going to pass across to Anna and Lawrence now, if that's okay, and I'll speak to you again at the end.
Great, thanks very much, Fiona. Really excited about this partnership, and I'm going to jump straight in to content, and then there'll be opportunity at the end to ask any questions. So always like to start with this slide. I think it's really clear why this is such a priority for us, but for the Department of Education, for all the schools involved. Like, we've got to the point where we just have to do something to further support those colleagues as they enter their careers. And I think the ECF is a really exciting way to do that. So obviously, grounded within the teacher recruitment and retention strategy. So one of the principles within that, and I think arguably the most important principle in terms of the scope and what it aims to achieve. So I just want to iterate like a couple of the variances that you might be encountering and some of the confusion that people might be experiencing around some of the versions of the programme and the different ways the DfE is supporting those programmes. So the initial timeframes for the early career framework was for a national rollout in 2021, which would be part of the statutory entitlements that all NQTs would benefit from across the country. But preceding that, the DfE were going to have an early rollout in the north of England, in Doncaster, Bradford, Greater Manchester and the North East, which really served a couple of things. It was going to give the opportunity to obviously provide the support in a fairly controlled environment to 2,500 NQTs and their mentors to test some of the methodologies of the national providers who were doing that piece of work. And it also allowed for the kind of outsourcing and the development of content to the four providers in that same time frame. And the key outputs of that are two things. There's the core induction program, which is essentially a suite of content and written materials which will be accessible to anyone across the country. And then there are the full induction programs, which are essentially the way that providers take that content and interpret that within their delivery model, the way that we work with delivery partners like we're doing in this consortium approach, and the way that we directly work with NQTs and mentors on our program. So that was a 2-year program running in those regions, and it was going to start a year early from 2020. Because of the impacts of coronavirus, which Fiona's already alluded to, we were in a position where the department wanted to explore how we could further support NQTs across the country who had suffered from missing the second school placements on their ITT.
I'm on my webinar.
And who were looking to start a very difficult NQT year, essentially, out of school, potentially for 6 months, all of those rhythms displaced. And we want to provide further support and structure for those people as they start their journey in teaching. So currently the position is to be opening up the recruitment of the early rollout nationally to additional 3,000 NQTs and their mentors, with the potential that we might go beyond that based on current recruitment trajectory. That is also going to be fully funded, but it's going to be a 1-year variant of the programme. The reason for that is the DfE have prioritised scale for that 1-year interim solution, although we are exploring with all partners, of course, how we will support those RQTs in the 2nd year as well. So a 1-year version of the programme, taking all of the same content, all of the same delivery model, and available to NQTs across the country. When we were considering the key challenges that ECTs and mentors are facing, and those are innumerable and will be obviously very apparent to you guys in your roles, but these are some of the ones that we picked out in terms of where we thought the ECF and our programme content could support. So for early career teachers, we're considering how key insights from training are forgotten. You may have experienced a brilliant NQT year and had fantastic mentoring, but if that isn't, if there isn't sustained change and sustained development embedded within that, people are going to lose that and experience the CPD plateau that we experience around year 5 of teaching. So how can we use this lengthened statutory induction to ameliorate that effect? Struggling to see the relevance. How can we ensure that content is linked between the insights and the strategies to ensure that NQTs and mentors have real tools that they can use, and that they understand that the principles of this broad framework are applicable to everyone. We just need to find the underlying structures that support those processes and that learning. And then insufficient time, very familiar to everyone, but we need to ensure that we're creating a solution that isn't an additional administrative burden to NQTs and their mentors. So we need to be streamlining that process, taking out the paperwork aspect and ensuring that this is actually meeting the needs of NQTs in a really, really positive way. For mentors, we felt that it was around breaking down teacher learning. If you're an expert teacher and it's been some time since your own NQT year, it will potentially be difficult to break down all of the different components, those subconscious routines that go into your own teaching practice. So communicating why is what I do really effective can be quite difficult. So we're trying to give the granular pieces of practice and the language required to support that process and support the transition of knowledge between those two people. Enabling ECTs to make sustainable changes to their practice, so linked to the key insights, and then crucially separating assessment from development. So the department's been really, really clear that the ECF is for development, it's not an additional assessment framework. Obviously there are very close kind of parallel lines that we don't want to meet. The framework itself has been structured in the language of the teacher standards for congruence, but we as Ambition are very much focused on development and not an additional assessment framework. I always like to start with these kind of key principles that we've considered when going into this project. So regular bite-sized learning is about ensuring that this is kind of digestible for ECTs, it fits within their current schemas of work, and it's about ensuring we're using an integrated learning model. So applying concepts like interleaving and spacing, which I know are super familiar to you guys, to provide a curriculum which is digestible and gives people the information at the right point. So it's matched up to their actual experience in the classroom. And within that, crucially, we want to ensure, again, that we're linking insights and strategies. So rather than just providing a toolkit that they can use, we want to ensure that they understand all of the structures and the methodologies that underpin the success of that practice. That's how we're going to ensure that we get greater buy-in from those individuals and they see the relevancy. Examples of classroom practice, so we're using exemplars in summary videos, which give people the chance to see kind of the practice being performed by an expert teacher. And we're also using written exemplification that we've developed with classroom teachers to ensure that people see how you translate this information to your real practice. Familiar routines is around, again, removing that administrative burden. So how do we embed this cycle in school in a natural way that's conducive to teacher education and doesn't feel like an additional burden? And practice makes permanent. So very much subscribe to the science of learning and the latest research around how people embed and recall information in their long-term memory. So how do we build an integrated curriculum that provides adequate opportunity to revisit content, potentially content from their ITT year, so that they're embedding that and they're building on that practice. This is a very high level way of kind of breaking that down. So essentially our offer is broken into broad termly focuses whilst applying that integrated learning methodology. So for instance, term 1 has a broad focus on behaviour because we feel that creating those conditions for learning is where NQTs experience the quickest wins in their first term. Term 2 is around instruction. Term 3 has a broad focus on subjects, so curriculum, planning and assessment. Within each of those, though, I always make the disclaimer that as an integrated learning model, you will, of course, have elements of all of those within each term. So we understand that your NQTs won't only experience behaviour-based issues or instruction-based issues in a term. So we have to be providing content that matches up with their real experience. Obviously, we're currently looking at a 1-year model for the extended version, but from national rollout, a 2-year version of the programme provides people the opportunity to revisit that content at a more advanced level, embed the practice, see the progress that they've made, and then move on. And these are the elements, I'm just going to put them all up on the screen, that go into the process of our programme. So I always want to draw attention first to these 2 long congruent strands between the mentor and the NQT, because that's really where the majority of the programme is taking place. An NQT and a mentor are working directly in partnership in the school on a weekly basis. And it essentially breaks down chronologically into these elements. So an NQT accesses their self-directed study materials on a weekly basis based on those termly focuses that I referred to earlier. A mentor is able to familiarise themselves with that content, ensure that they have all the language, the lexicons and the framework that they need to structure that conversation. Then they set some precise targets for their NQT. Just before I jump onto that weekly cycle, the way that we supplement that learning, and this is part of the partnership that we're doing in York, is by facilitated webinars, virtual twilights, that are delivered both to NQTs and mentors. So NQTs receive a half-termly webinar, which links up to around 6 weeks of content, and is an opportunity to do some collective sense making, tackle any misconceptions with the support of an expert facilitator, which is drawn from our partnership in the region. Mentors also have virtual twilights, but they're in the format of a peer learning group. So an opportunity to come together as a peer group, reflect on your experience of mentoring, again with that facilitation element to ensure that we're able to tackle any misconceptions, answer any questions around the methodologies that you're using on the programme. So just jumping back then to this weekly cycle, This is an example of term 1. So the way that we're sequencing that content on the behaviour strand. And you'll see here how the clinics start to match up with the self-directed study content that an NQT is accessing. So whilst they're working through the behaviour strand and their self-directed learning, they're also getting an NQT clinic from those regional facilitators on supporting all pupils and providing an overview of SEND code of practice. So in terms of the delivery model that we're using, obviously I've suggested earlier that we want to make this as streamlined as possible, and we want to make this as accessible as possible, not something that requires NQTs to sit down in a quiet room for 60 minutes with a textbook in order to get anything of value out of it. That's really what we wanted to avoid. So we went out to explore all of the learner management systems that were available a couple of years back and didn't find really anything fit for purpose in terms of what we wanted to do. So over the past few years, we've been developing our own platform, which we've tested on our pilot programs and have reiterated for this launch. That's called Step Lab. And what you're seeing now is an overview of the user interface that an NQT or a mentor would see as they access the Step Lab app. And they can do this through their laptop, their desktop computer, or through their mobile phone. The purpose of Step Lab is to provide that real bite-sized approach in the format that someone can just pick up in between lessons for 5 minutes while they're grabbing a cup of tea in the staff room and still take something of value away from that process. So the NQT format is broken down into read, watch, and reflect. So the NQT can work through the modules on a weekly basis. They can see the upcoming content that they're going to be experiencing. They can revisit any earlier modules. They have the opportunity to watch an insight video, which captures the exemplar of that practice so that they can see it in action. And they have opportunities for quiz and recall to promote their learning, as well as a primer, which sort of summarizes the most salient evidence base behind the practice that we're talking about. So the NQT is working through this. The mentor has a slightly different experience on the platform. So they also have access to self-directed study materials, both for the NQT and themselves. So they want to familiarize themselves with any of the information that the NQT is accessing. Of course, they can jump in, watch those videos, read those primers. And they also have some content directly for them around instructional coaching, etc., which will support their own development. But the mentor also has a coaching responsibility, obviously, with their NQT. So to do that, to scaffold that process, we do 2 things. The mentor sets precise targets for teachers based on watching their teacher's current teaching practice. So this is about linking up the knowledge that mentors have of their NQTs in a really granular way, which is going to be really accessible for the NQT, something that they can work on a weekly basis and have success within that. They do that by setting the precise targets through the online platform. So within each module, each weekly piece, they'll have around 12 precise targets that they can choose from, that they can set for their NQT. And they'll also have the option to edit or create new precise targets, particularly if they want to pass some of this content in the language or the systems that you guys use specifically in your schools. And once they've set those targets, those will feed through to the NQT's platform. So they will get an alert on Step Lab, which lets them know that the mentor has set them their weekly targets. And the mentor then uses those targets to base their observation. So rather than doing an hour-long observation once a month, what we're encouraging is a much more frequent but much shorter observations, and those should be based on the targets that you've set. So if I've set you a target around the entry routines for your pupils, I will want to be there at the beginning of the lesson to observe you applying those targets using that piece of practice. I don't need to stay for the duration of the lesson, because then I'm going to think of 9, 10, 11 more things that I want you to work on, and that's going to be quickly become unmanageable for the NQT in the time frame that they have allocated to them. So we set the precise target, the NQT knows that, and then we have the observation. We then scaffold the development of that session through the online platform. So we really subscribe to instructional coaching as one of the most evidence-based approaches to teacher education, one of the most impactful. And instructional coaching is really just around setting those precise targets and then providing feedback opportunities. So modeling what good looks like for those, so that there's no misunderstanding between the NQT and the mentor about what we're asking them to do. And then allowing them opportunity to practice that precise target. So to work through the active ingredients that we've allocated against that precise target with their mentor and get some live feedback, which they can then work on again. And in terms of time frames, we suggest that mentors will need around an hour a week to access this content. So 10 to 15 minutes, which they're using to familiarize themselves with the content and set some targets. Around a 10-minute observation based on the piece of practice that you've set, and then somewhere around a 30 to 40-minute instructional coaching session in order to work through those targets and provide your NQT with some really useful feedback. And the support that we're doing is obviously the scaffolding of the steps to ensure that mentors can pick those really quickly. They don't have to think about the language so much. A range of models alongside theory. So we know we don't want to take a one-size-fits-all approach. There will be ways to differentiate each precise target for the specific needs of your NQT. We provide some termly training in instructional coaching for mentors. So that's an opportunity for them to have a conversation with ambition faculty around best practice in instructional coaching, get some feedback and have some targets of their own in terms of developing their practice in those areas.
If we're already familiar with you, so if you're, somebody within the mats that are already covered here, then we will have probably already been in contact with you through either Sarah, Steve, or myself, and we'll make sure that your NQTs and your mentors are signed up, everything's sorted, you're ready to go for the September conference, and there's nothing that you really kind of need to worry about because it's been a very pressured term, and we're trying to make this as simple for people as possible. If you're SLT or another school that isn't involved yet and you want to be, do get in touch. All the contact information is there, and you're very, very welcome to come through to us, and we will make sure that we can get you on board. And like we said before, hopefully you'll be coming on board through us, but if we're not the right people to be directing you, we'll make sure that somebody is. For the NQTs and their mentors, there's also a meet and greet in August on the 11th at 5:30, so that they actually have some friendly faces, because I wouldn't underestimate how disruptive this term has really been for them. And if they can have a little bit of reassurance that actually everything's going to be okay in September, and that's not just the NQTs, that's the mentors too. We're asking them to do something new, but something really exciting and really impactful. But if they want, to be involved in that, then the meeting details are on your screen now. They also went out on the flyers, but you can also get in touch with us as well.